Tomorrow.
I'll call the meeting to order. I'd like to remind everybody to please turn off your cell phones. Keep them turned off for the duration of the meeting. Will the city clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Ford,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Moreno,
Here.
Councilman Benson. Mayor Ford, would you please press your button? Thank you, sir. Councilwoman Carson,
Present.
Councilman Teeter, Councilman McEldowney, Councilwoman Elliott,
Present.
and Councilman Douglas.
Present.
Mr. Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Did you say Mr. Bullock's name?
I don't think I did. I apologize. Mr. Bullock.
Present.
Thank you. Let the record show there are 7 of us here this evening. There are 2 council members missing, Mr. Teeter and Mr. McEldowney. I would like to ask the council their desires on excusing those 2 members. Mr. Moreno?
Move to excuse council members McEldowney and Teeter.
Thank you. Mr. Bullock?
Second that motion.
A motion and a second to excuse council members Teeter and McEldowney. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Motion's carried. I'd like to invite everybody to please stand and join me for a moment of silence. Please keep in your prayers Joe Roybal, who's in the hospital. He had a fall, and my understanding is that he's paralyzed from the neck down right now. I don't know if he'll recover from that. But Roybal's Barbershop in Derby, they've been there forever. So we'd like to have you keep him in your prayers and their family. And Mr. Bullock, you have another one?
Yes, if you could keep the family of Kathy Teeter in your prayers. Her brother passed away last week. So we just ask for you to think about them when you say a prayer tonight.
Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Now, I would invite the staff to go around and allow the citizens to introduce themselves. Thank you.
Ross Sibley.
Becky Hoffman.
Don Quick. Chuck Sonnier, Commerce City Police Department.
Sandy Carruthers.
Danny Thomas.
Betty Thomas.
Pam Spratler.
Hannah Mullen. Rita Contreras.
Harvis Thomas. Thank you.
Guillermo Serna.
Priscilla Mankowski.
Paul Solano.
Carolyn Keith, Parks and Recreation.
Chris Kramer, Community Development. David Foster.
Mizraim Cordero, Government Relations.
Thank you. No, we do not have a new council member. This happens to be Dominic's shadow, and I will let Mr. Moreno introduce his guest.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. From last week, something happened to Councilman Teeter. I don't know what happened, but I'm on the bright side. I'm no longer the youngest person on the council anymore. This is Tate Mankowski. He's the son of one of our city employees, Priscilla Mankowski, and as part of his program at his high school, he shadows someone for 20 hours, and he chose to get a feel for what municipal government's like, and then tomorrow we'll be getting a feel for what state government is like. So welcome, Tate, to the Commerce City Council.
Okay, thank you, Dominic. Next item on the agenda are our proclamations and presentations, and we have Adams County Youth Initiative, which was founded in 2005, is a county-wide collaboration dedicated to building a better tomorrow and ensuring that every Adams County child graduates from high school without a delinquency or substance abuse problem through partnerships, programs, and systems. ACYI is promoting local investment and building the capacity of agencies, families, and youth to work together towards achieving that vision. Will the staff please introduce the person presenting the information to the council?
Thank you, Mayor. Introduce Ross Sibley as Administrative Manager for this item. I'm sorry. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Council. It's my distinct pleasure to introduce to you District Attorney Don Quick and ACYI Director Becky Hoffman. Both have been involved in the youth initiative for quite some time. Don was one of the founding drivers of this youth initiative, and they're here to speak with you a little bit about what ACYI is all about.
Great, thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. I am Don Quick, the district attorney, at least for another 9 months of Adams and Broomfield counties. And Becky and I are very grateful to have you give us some time to talk to you a little bit about the initiative and the continuation of the initiative. We're very pleased. We're starting to get some great data in a lot of different areas as to things that we were interested in changing in Adams County, and that's decreasing the juvenile crime rate, increasing graduation rates, all the things that the schools have been trying to do. The youth initiative 7 years ago got together from all the different partners, schools, law enforcement, social services, physical health, mental health, and said we can do a lot more when we combine efforts. And if we do it with evidence-based programs, relying on real data, then we'll make better decisions that actually shows the taxpayers their dollars are well spent. Becky Hoffman is the executive director of the initiative, and she wanted to present some slides to you, giving an overview of it.
Thank you, Commerce City Council. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. And like Don was saying, we just wanted to provide a quick overview of the past of ACYI, where we are right now, and where we're hoping to go, especially as it relates to Commerce City. ACYI is made up of all leaders that have anything to do with young people in Adams County, and they're listed there in front of you, but there's District 14 is on our board, law enforcement, Commerce City, Chief Sonier. Juvenile justice and the youth serving agencies across the county are part of our partners. And the way the governing structure works is that each of these department heads are on our board of directors. So Chief Sonier is on our board of directors, and the chief appoints someone to be on our advisory board, which is Ross Sibley, and that we meet on a monthly basis. The need and the challenge to have an initiative like ACYI in Adams County is pretty great. Our child population is actually the second highest in Colorado. We have over 128,000 young people that live in our county. 44.4% of those kiddos that live in our county qualify for free or reduced lunch, as compared to 38.4% across the state of Colorado. And if we look at the health indicators, child abuse and neglect rates are also higher here in Adams County, and also uninsured children. One of the things that the Adams County Youth Initiative does every year is we put together what we call the Adams County Student Survey. We survey every 6th through 12th grader in 5 of the largest high schools, and we have data that we pair with this data as well, so that we can keep score on the things that we're working on. So this is just a quick snapshot on some of that data that we collect. So as Don was saying, our 3 goals that we've been working on since 2005, one of them was to increase high school graduation rates. Now, this slide is a little bit misleading, and when I show this to some of our educating partners, they get a little bit nervous, because in 2009, the Colorado Department of Education changed the formula on how we are keeping track of graduation in the county. But what this slide is showing is that, yes, graduation did dip, but we're on the right path. We're heading in the right direction. But that dip is related to how the Department of Education is keeping track of that data. And the way that they did that in 2009, or started doing in 2010, was on-time graduation. So looking at those kiddos that started in the 9th grade year and finishing by the time that they're seniors in high school. And so that's why we see that dip, but you can see that Adams County is trending in the right direction with graduation rates. One of our other main goals is on juvenile crime filings, and you can see that here in the 17th Judicial District, juvenile crime is way, way down across the county of Adams County. Did you want to say anything more about that, Don? Did he leave me?
I thought you shushed me away, so I didn't.
No, I didn't mean to.
Where this is, I think, really important is these are the state court filings. We're starting to work more with the cities now because you all, as you probably know, when it comes to minor juvenile delinquency, you'll take that kid a couple of times before you send them up to state court. And now we're trying to come up with unified strategies to also see more of a decrease in the municipal court juvenile filings as well. Some of those strategies is get an early assessment on the kid out of the Juvenile Assessment Center and find out, is it substance abuse, is it mental health, or the other dynamics that's driving the kid to be delinquent. And so that's why I want to show you this number. We think it's terrific. It's the most sharpest drop I can find anywhere, 42% in 6 years. There's been generally a drop, but not that degree. And we think it's really important to have that and maintain it low, but also work more with the cities on getting your municipal court filings for juveniles down as well.
One of the other goals that we've been working on is substance use. And this slide is a little bit interesting as well because this goes back to our Adams County Student Survey. This is self-reported use. We have indicators in our survey if we know that kids are kind of playing around with the survey or not answering it appropriately or actually just making patterns in our survey, we throw those out. So the response rate for this survey is over 75%, and like I said, we throw out the ones that look like they're just having a bit of fun with us. And so this is what 9th through 12th graders have reported over the last 3 years on alcohol use, and as you can see, it's been going up. Marijuana use has also been trending in a higher direction as well, and so the Adams County Youth Council, which has a lot of young people here from Commerce City, we actually had a rally in December where we had 150 people come and have a conversation about what will it take to start moving these indicators in a better direction. And I have a slide coming up specifically on Commerce City in just a moment. So here it is. So here's outcomes for Commerce City. And again, we can't take Adams County Youth Initiative can't take all the credit for this work, but just wanted to talk about how our partnership approach, bringing all partners to the table, started to really see this data trending in the right direction. And so the Adams County high school graduation rate increased by 3.3% last year in 2011, which was more than double than the state average increase. Attendance has also increased over the last 3 years, and substance use trends for just Adams City High School, self-reported alcohol use decreased by more than 6% from 2009 to 2010, and self-reported marijuana use did not increase amongst high school students. Now again, I just want to point out that that's self-reported use. We also have had a big emphasis on bullying, and in Adams City High School alone, 8.4% fewer students have reported being bullied over the last 3 years, and at Kearney Middle School, those numbers also decreased. But I think one thing that we're really proud about is that the increased participation in extracurricular activities, out of school time we call it, that 3.5% of more students participated in off-campus activities. One of the things we are most proud about is our Adams County Camp, which was held in Commerce City over the last 2 summers. And specifically, there was 56 campers from Commerce City alone that participated in 2011. We also have funded after-school programs in Alsop Elementary School and Adams City Middle School, and have also provided funds to the Boys and Girls Club at Kearney Middle School. That's just a bit of a snapshot of the outcomes for Commerce City. But also wanted to talk about one of our other flagship programs that's not listed in front of you is the Incredible Years program. Incredible Years is a social emotional program that happens in four schools and over 13 classrooms here in Commerce City, which teaches preschoolers things like boundaries all the way up to anger management. And some of your teachers here in Commerce City have said because of the Incredible Years program, it feels like there's 25 teachers in the room instead of 25 students. So it's a really great flagship program that the Youth Initiative has put together. So as we pause and we have talked about sunsetting our big federal Safe Schools Healthy Students grant, it's given the Adams County Youth Initiative an opportunity to really refine our focus. And one thing that's happened in the nonprofit world is an article called Social Impact, this by the Stanford Social Innovation Review. If you haven't heard about it, it's an interesting article that talks about how you really need to have one collaborative in a community working together to have a common agenda to solve a specific problem. And so collective impact is kind of our new Bible for the Adams County Youth Initiative. And I'll just read this out. It's the commitment of a group of important actors from different sectors to a common agenda for solving a specific social problem. So here's ACY's vision and mission. I think we mentioned it before, working together, cradle to career, to build a better tomorrow. Like I had mentioned before, we had the federal grant where we were working on everything from social emotional programming in the early childhood area to after-school programs to even post-secondary. So, council folks, you have this in front of you. This is our new roadmap, if you will. This is how the Adams County Youth Initiative would like to keep score. And so these are the indicators as we progress into for the next 3 to 5 to 10 years of how we're going to be gauging our success in the future. I can just point out one to bring it to life. Children read with proficiency at the end of 3rd grade. So partners are really kind of mobilized to how are we going to really move 3rd grade reading in this county. And so we've been talking a lot about after-school programs and out-of-school time and summer programs. There's partners that are already meeting in the community to talk about how can we move 3rd grade reading during the out-of-school hours. So just to kind of, did you want to say something else?
Very quickly. The reason why we give you that long spectrum is because in order to have an effective intervention with kids and their families, you have to start very early. Families are different than they were a generation ago, and you don't have to approve or disapprove the changes, but you just have to admit they occur. There's less parents around in the after-school hours, and the after-school hours are the hours of highest juvenile crime except for sex assaults. All other juvenile crime peaks between 3 and 6:30. So you have to another perfect example is the learning gap. And Biggie talked about showing up in 3rd grade and being able to read. The research shows us that if a kid who shows up with a learning gap in 1st grade or kindergarten for the first time and can't read, compared to the kid next to him, doesn't like school, doesn't feel like school is good for them, and starts underperforming at that early age. And I think it's a sin for us to look at 5- and 6-year-olds and already predict that their future is about 30% chance of success compared to the kids sitting next to them. And so the earliest program that the Youth Initiative funds is the Nurse Family Partnership Program. And with that program, if people aren't familiar with it, it's an evidence-based program, a national model, that's actually out of the CU Health Sciences Center. But that hooks up a visiting nurse with a young mom, usually single, poor, too often a kid of color who's pregnant and doesn't know about proper nutrition and birthing information. And that nurse stays with that girl and the baby until the kid's 2.5 and in a early Head Start program. And so already we can start to see the results. Now that research on that program, not surprisingly, closes the learning gap. But the long-term research for that program shows that those kids that have nurse-family partnerships go into the justice system at a much lesser rate. Isn't that interesting? But it goes to show us that there's dominoes, and those lines on this board are dominoes, and the dominoes can go in the right direction for kids that can succeed at school and like school or not. And it's really unfair for a kid that doesn't read at home, even read English or speak English at home, to be expected to compete unless we give them a fair chance and give them a chance of showing up in 1st grade, able to read and compete with the kid in the chair next to them. And so that's what these are. The ultimate outcome is to get the kids to graduate without a criminal history or drug problem. But really these stepping stones from a healthy start to a good quality preschool program to showing up without a learning gap, to be able in 3rd grade to read and also be socially, how to deal socially with the school, to go into middle school and not be truant, to have parents that are still engaged in middle school. Becky didn't talk about that, but that's one of those things also is engaging parents. And one of our programs is teaching parents to be leaders in parenting schools. I had an 11-year-old who knew everything, an 11-year-old who wanted to know everything became a 12-year-old that did. And it was tough. I would have liked to have had some parenting skills on that of commuting from one stage to the other. And so these steps, make a lot of logic, but also in the research they say these are the right steps, how you implement a long-term plan for a kid and his family to be successful. So, sorry.
No, that's okay. So just to wrap it up, what is ACY's role as we move forward, and really what is in this for Commerce City? And so when we think about the collective impact article and we think about how we can really make that come to life here in Adams County, it's making sure that all of our partners, everyone that works with kids, has a shared vision and has the same vision to work towards the right things. Secondly, and I used to refer that as keeping our eye on the same ball. Data-driven decision-making, and like going back to our roadmap, how are we keeping score on this collaborative? How are we keeping score on the things that really make sense for kids in our community? We haven't talked about it a lot, but the Adams County Youth Initiative's bread and butter has always been only using evidence-based best practice programs, using the things that work best for the kids that need it most. Third of all is around collaborative action. Instead of having a lot of folks in the room having the same conversation and trying to really move an agenda, we're implementing things called continuous collective improvement, like Six Sigma. And that's really about mobilizing the right action teams to the things that make the most sense. And then last but not least is about sustainability. How can we streamline funding, avoid duplication, and kind of have the best bang for our buck when we're talking about the best stuff for kids. So that, in the packet that I provided with you, is kind of there's the second page is a bit more of an overview, bringing that information to life. So last but not least, is there any questions for me or for Don or the chief?
Yes, Mr. Benson?
Yes, thank you. Don, this was your creation, wasn't it, the ACYI?
Sorry.
Don.
Thanks for coming.
We brought people together originally after I got elected, but there was a lot of people from Commerce City who were in the room that first day we met.
Right. Are there any other judicial districts that have a similar type of thing?
No, there isn't. There are others that are beginning to do this because our stats are getting out that we've had a 42% crime. I was just down testifying about direct files, and that's where we charge kids as adults for violent crimes. And I was able to say in Adams County we've reduced those direct file crimes by 84% since we started this, which is a huge number. Last year we only filed on 4 kids for direct files, filing them as adults. So, no, I don't know anybody else. Other people have decreases, not to the degrees that we've seen, but it's the partnership. It's your schools are doing the right things. It's just that we're doing the right things together.
I know it seems like that's the way a lot of DAs choose to do it, is by increasing the filings and trying to rehabilitate through some sort of detention or boot camp type thing, but this is a much better way to do it. I think it not only is it a better way and more effective and more long-lasting, it costs a lot less in the long run. And I just want to, when I see these filings that are down from 1,012 in 2005 to 587 in 2011, that's quite an accomplishment.
Thank you.
So thank you.
And it is, thank you, Councilman. It is very cost effective. We didn't mention that. Every kid you get to finish high school reduces his chance of going into the justice system by 50% by just finishing high school. And the reverse is true, that a kid that drops out of high school is going to cost your community an extra $290,000 through that kid's lifetime. That was a 2009 study for extra social service costs, criminal justice costs, health care. They don't have insurance because they don't have jobs because they dropped out of high school. And so the dominoes, again, go in a different direction. But you're exactly right, Councilman. If you're able to do this comprehensive model, you can save money. And not just in the long term. You can start saving immediately.
Well, let's just hope that your successor will put the same effort into it that you have. Thank you.
Dave Young is committed to it. And he's the only one running, so I told him he's polling
on
really
a
well.
post. I'm not making a political comment. Okay, so thank you. Okay.
Mr. Douglas.
Thank you, Don and Becky, for your presentation. I see beginning you talk about school districts here in Adams County, but I don't see anything on Prairie View High School. Do you have any stats or studies on Prairie View High School?
Actually, we have over 5 young people from Prairie View High School that are on the Adams County Youth Initiative, and they are part of the Adams County Student Survey. The thing with the Adams County Student Survey is that in order to get the buy-in from the schools to do it, we only present the county-wide results, and we don't present the school-wide results. And just from the school's perspective, that was the way we could get the data sharing agreements in place.
But, Councilman, I think that's a great question, and that's what we thought we've been successful. A lot of initiatives, when they try to get to do data from the schools, find to face a lot of resistance. And this is what we decided 5-6 years ago when we started it, is that we'll release the countywide data, but the schools can decide, do they release certain data at a district or individual school level. So it's the best of all worlds. They're not afraid that we're going to have data that shows they ought to have this program, but there's no money to have that program, so they're hanging out. But what I think is important for the City Council to be engaged with you can talk to those school districts and they can tell you, is it a bullying issue in this area? Is there a gang issue in this area? And so you can really plan the services to match that particular school due to the surveys there. And we'll see that. In some schools, there's a significant bullying response. In other schools, there's some gang response. And so it really depends on what area you're in as to what those issues are. It's not a cookie cutter, one size fit all, but I think it'd be a great dialogue for you all to have with the school district and say, we want to use our dollars in the most effective way, so let's talk about what the survey says is the best investment for Commerce City in the different areas of the city. It's exactly the right question.
Because this program is going to help with all the schools in Adams County, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And if I can brag about us, we originally applied for the $8 million grant that runs out in August. We were competing with 350 communities around the country, and we were one of 18 that got it then. They just evaluated us a year ago? 6 months ago? Recently. A year ago. Yeah, and they ranked us in the top 4% of communities that have received this grant since 1999. And the reason being is that we're firmly committed to having everybody in the community involved, like your police chief. When the guy from the Department of Education came out, he was shocked that police chiefs and the DAs were sitting around a table with the school superintendents and the social services director. He says that doesn't happen in other communities. But they really are the same issue. I mean, a kid that gets into trouble, it's not comparing apples and oranges. A kid in trouble in school is going to be my issue 2 or 3 years down the road unless we intervene better. So what I like to say, it's not apples and oranges. They're just apples at different times. But you got to get away from, as Councilman Benson was saying, from this conventional mentality of, okay, this is what the best response is, and really look at what the research. The Scared Straight is a perfect example. The DAs loved Scared Straight for a while. We used to support it. About 10 years ago, we got the research. It doesn't make a difference. In fact, with some kids, it made them offend more. They thought going down to prison and seeing those guys were cool, so their rates of reoffending was even greater. So we quit funding it. And we've already stopped funding one program, the Good Behavior Game. Blueprint program, supposed to have good results. Well, we implemented it. It didn't have the results that we wanted, and it's tough love, and we cut that program to move the money into programs that do work.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Mr. Moreno.
Just a couple of quick comments. I've had the privilege of being able to tour the camp the last 2 summers, and actually had a nephew and niece in the camp this last summer. And one of the things that I didn't see in your presentation, but I did want you to maybe address to folks in the audience, is the achievement gap that you also cover, that instead of the kids going home and watching TV for a summer, they're actually learning, and they're getting these very innovative approaches to learning. So could you speak to that a little bit?
Sure. It's something called summer learning loss. And what happens is that our schools districts are actually doing a really great job of educating kids when they have them. But what happens during the summer months is kids with more social economic opportunities are reading and going to camps and doing really interesting things over camp, where some of our lower income kids don't have that opportunity. And so what happens over the summer, and after summer after summer after summer, it's called the summer learning loss. And so that's exactly what the Adams County camp really focused on, is kind of grabbing those kiddos for the summer and making sure that they had the same opportunities as other kids for 6 weeks of not only reading, but enrichment and fun.
Talking about hidden learning a little bit.
Sure.
Okay.
So, and the curriculum was based around kind of 5 core elements, but the one was around hidden learning. So instead of kids just doing reading and multiple tables, we were bringing in all kinds of providers from all over the metro area. And while they were shooting off rocket ships and making their own volcanoes, they were actually learning as well. And so we call it hidden learning, sneaky learning.
That's great. And one other thing that I just wanted to touch on is that, you've described that this grant will be running out in August, and I think it's unquestionable the value of this program to the Adams County community. What can people do to help to make sure this program continues into the future?
Well, at the moment, we are doing presentations with school districts and city councils and all the partners that we mentioned on the first slide. And basically, to do the 4 things that we talked about doing related to that pipeline, we're looking at an annual budget of about $300,000. So our first strategy is to go back to our partners and to say, are you interested? Have you found value in ACY in the past? And what value could you see it in the future? And so there actually is a letter shamelessly in your packet on the first page that talks a little bit more about our specific ask to Commerce City. But really that idea is just more of a commitment feed, making sure that we can leverage local dollars to attract foundations and state grants to kind of go back to the level of programming that we were kind of used to. For the last 5 years, our annual operating budget was about $1 million to do all the things that we want to do. And so now we are taking the opportunity to really refine our focus back to this roadmap. So does that answer your question?
Yes.
Becky has never run for office, so she's still a little hesitant to ask for money. The rest of us, I actually shameless when it's not me. I feel really comfortable doing to it. And the breakdown is we need 75 to finish. That's the last quarter of 2012, 75 to finish. And that is just to keep the survey going and keeping the staff of three going as well. And then for 2013, we're asking for some help, but the bulk of the funding for 2013 we're hoping will come out of foundations and federal grants. We met with Senators Bennett and Udall as well as the congressmen, people that represent Adams, and they seemed very positive. It was just a bad year not to have earmarks because this would have been a very politically sound earmark decision, except there aren't earmarks now. So they're hustling to try to help us locating funds. But if you're asking specifically what we need from Commerce City is money in the short term to get through 2012, and then we'll be in a better position next year to telling you how much we need in order to get that bigger number. And we're talking to the chief about it as well and seeing about how he's willing to help us as well.
Great. And I won't presume to speak for the rest of the council, but I do see the value in this program, and I'd like to see it continue into the future, not only to reduce juvenile delinquency in our kids, but also you address the summer learning achievement gap. You would do so much more to make sure that our kids are ready for school in the fall. So if it was me, you would have everything that you need. But that's for the council to decide.
I would just like to share that School District 14 actually committed financially last week, and really happy to do so, and wanted to be here tonight, but it was spring break and a lot of them are out of town. So just want to, your school district is on board as well.
Thank you.
Great. I want to thank both of you for coming in. It is a great program, and we will be discussing that as a council on helping you through the end of 2012. But thanks so much for coming in. Great to always see you, Don.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you all for the opportunity to speak with you.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, evidently, when I was gone last week, somebody removed my button for request to speak. It is not there. But thank you. Thank you for the time and effort that you have put into our children. It takes much more than school districts to take care of our kids. It takes entire communities. And as Mr. Marino said, yes, this is a program that we need to continue investing in. But thank you for your presentation and the great work that you do.
Thank you.
I just want to share the last thing is thank you to your police department. We have really something special that we have 7 law enforcement that come to the table, and these 2 guys have been great. And so I just want to share and give them a round of applause because they've just been fabulous.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda, citizen communication. When I call your name, please come to the podium, state your name and address for the record, and I'll remind you that you have 3 minutes. Mr. Guillermo Serna.
Mayor, I'm going to take prerogative. You asked about Commerce City being involved, Mr. Benson, and Guillermo Serna was at the first meeting, and for the next 2 years was there every time. So he's a perfect example of involvement from Commerce City.
Great. Thank you. Mr. Serna.
Guillermo Serna, 14122 East 102nd Place, Commerce City, Colorado, 80022.
Good evening.
Just 1 minute on his presentation. When you talk about fees for a city and for a county, I think that in every city should have a fee to get this done, because it will only benefit the county and the cities itself. And what brings businesses in? A good quality community. And each one of our children deserve the quality of life. But the reason I'm up here is, and I'm not scared to ask for money. And I hope that somehow, some way, you can find a way for you in the district to see how you can cooperate in keeping this in a sustainable way year after year after year. RTD, Interstate 70. Please, as our city councilmen, as our city managers, as our lawyers, as our economic developments, please don't leave your guard down. there's too much talk of what can happen with RTD. There's too much talk about what can happen with Interstate 70. And you need the experience of some of the people that are no longer here. But there are experienced people that can advise you in those directions. I'm just saying, don't lose touch of it, because a lot of things depend on what happens on elections, and at the same time, what happens on the community itself on Interstate 70, and what we should be getting from RTD. We're not getting enough from RTD. And Interstate 70, you have to keep that guard on. That's why these elections are important. So it's just a reminder to please don't leave your guard down. Work your administrators to give you the information to be ready. Work Mr. Benson, who sits on CDOT, to get you the information that you need to make good decisions in the near future here. That's all I got to say. Thank you.
Okay, there's a few council members that would like to respond. Mr. Benson?
Guillermo, thank you for that promotion. But I'm on the State Transportation Advisory Committee, and we advise CDOT. It's a little bit different, but
You can advise very well, Mr.
right.
Benson.
And that the issue of I-70 has come up maybe about 2 or 3 times in the past year, and it's always been that we're going towards sticking with the existing alignment. And believe me, if I hear anything that's changing, everybody that needs to know in this city will find out about it. But the word is that they're going with the existing alignment. Everything can change. Now, as far as Fast Tracks is concerned, I have no idea what's going on there. I don't have much confidence in anything that's going to happen in our favor as far as that's concerned. But rest assured that being on the State Transportation Advisory Committee, my ears are very well tuned in to that issue. So, thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Bullock?
Yes, Mr. Cerna, there was an article in the Denver Post yesterday on Interstate 70, and you can be well aware that me being on the committee before I went off council back in 06, 07, I am keeping my eye on Interstate 70 because you never know at what given time somebody's going to make an arbitrary decision to move it someplace, and nobody will know until somebody's up there with a shovel digging ground. So we are definitely very vigilant on keeping our eye on both RTD and Interstate 70. Thank you so much for your response to that.
You're welcome.
Mr. Moreno?
Just to quickly pick up on Councilman Bullock's comments, the article in the Denver Post that ran about the I-70 East Corridor project is troubling in a lot of ways, because what they're advocating for is to scrap everything that the collaborative came up with and start over. I think this council needs to be very proactive in asking the I-70 East stakeholder group to come and give us an update and what's going on with that right now. I just don't want to see Commerce City left out of the equation if they decide to proceed with another plan.
I agree.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming in today, Mr.
Okay.
Cerna. Next, I'll call up Hannah and Rita. Good evening.
Good evening.
I need your name and address for the
I'm
record.
Hannah Mullen. This is Rita Contreras, and we're with Congressman Perlmutter. So our address is 12600 West Colfax Avenue in Lakewood. We don't want to take up too much of your guys' time this evening. We just wanted to stop in and say hello and make sure that you all knew that we were the points of contact locally for Congressman Perlmutter. So we just wanted to stop in and say hi. And Rita is new to our office. She just started a couple weeks ago. So we're the Adams County folks.
Great.
And that's all.
I would like to at least say I'm glad you were here to listen to the stuff that Don Quick and his cohort had to bring to us this evening, looking for some funding.
Yes.
You might let the congressman know that
We've
we're
actually
supportive.
been, we've done some letters of support for the initiative.
Perfect.
so.
And then, keep your eye on this I-70 thing for us as well, that Mr.
yeah.
Cerna brought up. But it's always great to have representatives come into our council meeting and pay attention to what's going on a local level. So thanks for coming in this evening.
Sure. Great.
Mr. Bullock, you have something?
Yes. I just want to say it's nice to meet you, Rita, and we expect to see you from time to time, and I see Hannah all the time, so thank you for coming in.
Thank you. I actually will be doing backup on Adams County issues with Hannah, so we'll probably be rotating these meetings. And just to give you a little background where I come from, so today marks my third week in the office for the congressman, but I come from the Denver City Council. So I had 20 years with Denver City Council, working for 10 different members of council throughout my years there. So I have a lot of respect for local elected officials, but I'm excited to be serving for the congressman. So thank
Great.
you for having me.
Great to have you here. Thanks again.
Also, I'm going to put some of my business cards at the back table if anybody wants to grab one on the way.
That would be great. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is a resolution, Resolution 2012-10. The staff wish to come forward and address the council on this resolution before I ask for a motion.
Community Development Director Chris Kramer will be making this presentation. The council heard this before, but at this point we need authorization for the mayor's signature.
Okay.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. As Mr. Clements referenced, this is a brief follow-up to a presentation made on February 6th by Jim Hayes. In that presentation, council approved a memorandum of understanding that outlined the terms of our local match requirement that is a part of the North Metro line of the Fast Tracks program. So as a part of that, $4.7 million, that would only be required if funding becomes available and the North Metro line needs to be built in full. So all of the discussion that we're going to have is only about if they need a vote, if that vote passes, et cetera. In the Memorandum of Understanding, it outlines a few different strategies to help the city address its local match requirement of $4.7 million. One of those strategies outlined in the Memorandum of Understanding is a DRCOG grant, TIP funding, that all of the jurisdictions up and down the North Metro corridor are jointly applying for. The Commerce City portion of that grant would be $1.53 million. So that would be $1.53 million of the $4.7 that we're required to have would be covered by this DRCOG grant. The reason staff is here tonight is to request City Council authorize the mayor to sign a letter of support to go along with this grant application. To date, we have all of the member jurisdictions, that would be North Glen, Thornton, Adams County, Denver, and two partners, which are RTD and CDOT. Everybody is signed, so we're the last ones left that just need the signature. So staff, since it's required for the mayor to sign that, staff is requesting that council authorize the mayor to sign that by resolution.
Okay. Is there, at this time, any questions for staff by the council? Seeing none, is there anyone in the audience who has any comments on this item before we move forward? Seeing none, what are the desires of the council? Mr. Moreno?
Move to approve Resolution 2012-10.
Mr. Bullock?
Second the motion.
A motion is second to approve Resolution 2012-10. Mr. Attorney?
Title reads, Resolution Approving Fast Tracks Corridor Funding Request, number 2012-10.
Thank you. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Motion's carried. Next item on the agenda is an ordinance on first reading, Ordinance 1890. This is an ordinance amending Section 2-2001 of the Commerce City Revised Municipal Code regarding regular meetings and study sessions of the City of Commerce City City Council. What are the desires of council? Mr. Bullock.
Move to approve ordinance 1890 on first reading. Council is seated.
Mr. Douglas.
Second.
A motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Mr. Moreno?
I'd just like to ask staff if there's anyone that could speak to the actual logistics of how a switch like this will occur. I know we had some previous discussions in the council retreat about the transparency, I guess I'll say, of the study session meetings, if that would still be possible, considering that the video live stream that we have now is only available for formal meetings.
Councilman Marino, the plan at this point, obviously the council can change that, is that the meeting would be held in the the conference room 2308, which is outside of community development, and that room is not set up for video. There's no plan for any audio at this time, and so the meetings, the alternate study session meetings, would be held in that conference room.
Thank you. I don't disagree at all with the move to study sessions, but the concern that I've had from the beginning is what I view as a certain loss of transparency in moving to the new system. Currently, all of our meetings are formal meetings. They're televised for people to watch at home, which has its advantages and disadvantages. But moving to study sessions, we would be cutting off that access. And that's concerning for me.
Thank you, Mr. Moreno. I also have the same type of concerns. The one thing I will tell you, though, is there can be no business voted on or done in a study session. It's for information so that we can better make decisions in this setting. So with that being said, the residents are always welcome to come to a study session, but ultimately everything will have to be done in this formal setting, and that is televised, so those folks at home will be able to see everything that is voted on. There will be nothing voted on in those meetings. They're information-only type of meetings. So I think that the important thing is that the residents know that they get to see on the live stream everything that's taking place in this setting, that those other settings are just to help us better make decisions and have more information.
Thank you.
Seeing no one else with any comments, I have a motion and a second. Mr. Gallagher.
Okay. Title reads, an ordinance amending Section 2-2001 of the Commerce City Revised Municipal Code regarding regular meetings and study sessions of the City Council. I'd point out to the council that in your packet, there was an earlier version of this ordinance, and that's what you see on the screen because it only refers to regular meetings. I changed the verbiage in that ordinance to address one of the concerns that has been expressed this evening. The way the ordinance, as now written, that you have in front of you, and as I read the title, gives you the flexibility for study sessions if you choose to, and if you find it's not working the way you want it to, this ordinance would not have to be changed again because it simply provides that meetings, regular meetings and study sessions would be held at the Civic Center. It doesn't focus strictly on council chambers. So if you later on decide that you want to experiment differently, this ordinance would not have to be changed because it says in the Civic Center is where the meetings have to be held. So you can move it from room to room as you see fit.
Okay.
Thank you.
Want to read the title?
He did.
Is it all done?
Yes, I read the
Okay.
title.
I'll ask for a roll call vote. Let the record show that the motion and second are approved, 6-1. Next item on the agenda, we have some study session items this evening. Quality Community Initiative. I'd ask the staff to introduce that.
I would introduce Intergovernmental Relations Manager, Ms. Ryan Cordero, who will introduce our visitors.
Okay.
Good evening, Mayor and members of Council. I would like to introduce Mr. David Foster, who's here to speak to you about the Quality Community Initiative Stakeholder Group.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. I'm only here representing the group. As you know, Maria Gonzalez and Jacob Rieger are my co-chairs, and I think I drew the lucky straw and got to be here tonight to give you an update. I know that Maria was here a short time ago to update you. We have a kind of a quick PowerPoint. Many of you were on council at the time that the QCI was created. Some of you were not. And so just as kind of a reminder, I assume that's what this is? Okay. As a reminder as to what the Community Quality Initiatives was, this was an opportunity to gather people from a varied backgrounds, both members of the community and members outside of your community in various different with various different interests that were focusing on the needs of the community, mostly focused on infrastructure, whether that be parks and trails or roads, bridges, recreation facilities, sewer and water, those kinds of infrastructure facilities. The QCI was originally appointed by City Council. We've had, and I'll show you a slide in a moment as to the different meetings that we've had, but we've had a number of briefings by staff. Then we tried to draft a number of strategies and test the strategies in the community, and then ultimately come back to you as a council to find a formal recommendation that moves on maybe to the community at large or elsewhere. We didn't really have a plan when we started this project. We didn't have something that was going to be certainly forwarded to you as a recommendation. It's really a work in progress. We've already met 6 times. You can see those dates there. Meet early in the morning on a Friday. We've run into some of you in City Hall for those Friday mornings. We've had a terrific number of meetings that talked about the long-range financial plan. Roger has been terrific in his description of those matters. Chris Kramer was terrific in giving us an overview of the C3 vision. David Kenny, some of you may know, is a political consultant. He ran the Better Denver programs, ran a number of local campaigns, came in to explain how Denver put together their program. And we most recently had a discussion on, really what the direction of council was and how to prioritize different projects and classify those moving forward. Again, you've got a great group of people who are showing up routinely to talk about the future of Commerce City. Sandy Carruthers is behind me. I think she showed up tonight just to make sure I was representing the group well, and if I'm not, I'm sure she'll throw something at my head. But we have a great number of people who've been showing up and giving their input, and it's really going to be, it's a work in progress, and we're going to figure out really what the best plan is to recommend to you as a city council to move forward. We're going to engage in probably some listening tours within the community to find out what your constituents demand and want to see within this community, and ultimately figure out how to fund for those. I assume, Councilman Moreno, the gentleman you brought tonight knows that he has to write a check for his participation, so we'll start with his check. But then beyond that, we'll figure out other ways in which to finance all of the improvements that the community may want. So ultimately, are we on the right track? These are questions that hopefully we get some answers to from all of you tonight. Are we on the right track? Does this cause heartburn for any of you? And is there any further direction you would like to provide to the group? As I mentioned, some of you weren't around when it was initially created, so we wanted to kind of do a check-in so that you weren't surprised when we ultimately came back with a recommendation. So I don't have any other slides, and we open it up to those of you to really inform us, help us help you.
Well, thanks for coming in this evening. It's always nice to see you.
Thanks, Mayor.
And I have attended at least one QCI meeting.
Yes.
I would ask Mr. Bullock for his comments.
As far as the committee's moving forward, I'm really glad we have a citizen and business group committee that is looking at the same issues that we're going to be dealing with and can come back with some input on what they would do for our 10-year plan down the road to fund a lot of the issues that we have and a lot of the things that are coming. It isn't causing me any heartburn. What causes me heartburn is to know that in the next 10 years we have close to $1 billion worth of projects in this city to complete, and we don't have $1 billion. And so how do we prioritize these? But I am so glad we have people that can bring us back helpful information and input and say, this is what the community thinks. Now, you can use it or not, but this is input from business, community members, and the like. So I'm just keep moving forward and do what you're doing and bring us back a nice comprehensive report as far as I'm concerned, so it helps me with my job. Thank you.
Mr. Moreno.
Mr. Foster, I appreciate the presentation and the update. As the new members of council know, this was a project that was commissioned by the last council, and that's why I think it's important that the new council is updated and that they know what's going on and what the mission of this group is. I will say that during our council retreat, we did start to preempt, I think, some of the work of the QCI, just because when you're faced with the reality of everything that we have to fund in the next really 10 to 15 years, the expansion of Tower Road, the expansion of trails and parks in both the core city and the Northern Range, it's daunting. And the council, I think, was having a very fruitful discussion about what we could possibly do to look at diversifying our budget and raising some additional sources of revenue. But at the end of the day, we all kind of came to the conclusion that that's what we commissioned this group to do. That's what we asked you to look at. So we kind of just let it go at that point, and I think we're going to wait and see what you come up with. I think this project is coming at a really timely time for Commerce City. I think we're having a discussion at the state level about what kind of services citizens want and what kind of Colorado they want to live in. The same question has to be asked of your city. And for example, we had a hefty discussion before this new council about the garbage collection fee and whether or not that was something that we would pursue. And I'm not saying that we should or we should not. It's just a question of where you place your priorities. If free trash collection is a value for you, then that's fine, and the city should continue to provide that service. But it's just a question of priorities, and I'm excited to see what this group comes out with based on your listening tour of the community.
Mr. Douglas.
Thanks, David, for your presentation, and it's good to see you. There was some discussion about the stakeholders group, and how that was initiated and going forward, how's that going to benefit the city. And I would like the group, you guys meet on Fridays, right?
Right.
And I'm going to try to make some of your future meetings, because I would like to meet the folks who come and attend. I have some questions and all for them. I would like for them to see if the way our city is structured as far as the government, if it fits the size of our city. I feel that, certain areas we are top-heavy, and we need to make sure that we're going in the right direction that way. And I'd like to see what the stakeholders have to say about that. And I have some other concerns, well, not concerns, but things I'd like to bring up, but I'd like to present that to the group, not just, say anything now. I want to write down and think about what I need to say to the group and going forward, and just hear what I have to say. I mean, I think everybody's opinion is very valuable, and be interested to see what they come back with. Thanks.
Let me just respond to one comment there, Councilman. I would say that we have certainly done a pretty comprehensive financial analysis of the city, but we didn't really have as one of our charges to kind of take an inventory of administration, and so that would kind of change our course a little bit, because that really wasn't, at least from what I understood when I was asked to participate, what the goals were for this particular group. And so, I mean, I guess we can kind of talk offline a little bit, but I just want to make sure that we continue to move forward with, I mean, you've got people who've already put in, I mean, as a group, hundreds of hours, studying and understanding issues, and I just want to make sure we continue down that path. I just don't want to leave you with a false, impression that that's one of the areas that we've spent any time concentrating on, because I don't know that we were asked to.
Okay, because I look at and look and listen that we're going to look at things to things are going to come up that we want, that's going to benefit the city as far as moving forward, building our city. We have a lot of growth ahead of us, and we have to make sure that what we're asking our citizens to do, help pay for this, we got to make sure that we're balanced going forward as well, and because that's going to come into play as well. Mm-hmm. So,
I understand that.
Okay, thanks.
Councilwoman Carson?
It's really difficult not having a button. Thank you, Mr. Foster, and to the group. A lot of hard work and effort and time has gone into this, and I know there's some extremely committed people. Mr. Douglas, I know you weren't here when this was initiated, but anybody sitting here who was here before, remind me if I'm wrong. Council took the decision to form this group and at length discussed the idea whether council would participate in it or not. We decided that it should be absent of council so that this group truly went forward on their own without any influence or intimidation, whatever word you want to use, that a council person would have on that group. So the group has functioned, in my understanding, very well with us staying out of it, and are really coming up with what their opinion and views of what they are learning and hearing from the city. We all know what we hear from our constituents, from our neighbors, but this is an independent group of that. So I'm bringing that up because I know you weren't here, and it really was an understanding that we thought they would prosper much better if council really kind of took almost an absent seat to this.
Okay. Mr. Douglas?
Okay, well, if I'm sure a few council members have attended some of these meetings without speaking there, so is that correct? So if I do go, I will not speak. I'll just listen.
Thank you, Mr. Douglas. The times that I have attended and I am invited, I've been there to observe. I think the organization is moving along fine. Look forward to some really neat type of ideas that will help us through some of our troubling times by this organization. So please take that back to the QCI board. But thank you for coming in this evening.
Thank you, and of course, you already know this, but Ms. is, you know, a rock star here in this community, and he's been great as staff to our group, so thank you for letting him spend as much time as he does with us.
You bet. Thanks again. Next item on the agenda, Northeast Greenway Corridor discussion. Mr. Brown?
I'd like to recognize Carolyn Keith and her staff, Mike Brown and Tracy Ferguson. They've spent a lot of time on this subject in the last months. Mike Brown will be making the presentation. There's a lot of information here, and my suggestion would be Mike make the presentation. I think he'll answer a lot of your questions. Give him a chance to answer those. You might check the page number of the presentation for returning on questions, and that would be the suggested way to approach this.
Okay.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of City Council. Again, I'm Mike Brown. I'm the Parks Planning and Operations Manager in the Parks and Recreation Department. Also here this evening is Tracy Ferguson, our Parks Planner. And Tracy is the point person for staff on the Northeast Greenway Corridor, which specifically we're going to talk about here in a moment. I wanted to mention up front that this is an update to the council. There's no specific request for any action this evening. We just want to take a few moments to update you on the current activities of the Northeast Greenway Corridor Group, and more specifically related to the Rocky Mountain Arsenal Natural Resource Damage Settlement. So by way of a little bit of history, starting with natural resource damage cases, and this one specifically, this is the lawsuit that was filed by the state against the Shell Oil Company and the U.S. Army. And what's important to understand is that natural resource damage cases are governed by state statute, and they're also administered by the state trustees, which specifically listed there are the Attorney General, the Executive Director, the CDPHE, as well as the Executive Director of the Colorado Department of Natural Resources. It's also important to know that any funds that come out of a natural resource damage settlement, specifically, they must be spent on projects or efforts that restore, replace, or acquire the equivalent of the injured natural resource. So in this specific case, that would be restoration or replacement or restorative efforts for surface water, groundwater systems, and I have these all listed here in the slide: geological resources, which is really soil, biological resources, or plants and animals, and their associated habitats, and then more specifically, wetlands. The funds can't be, they're intended for construction or acquisition of property. They're not intended or allowed to be used for planning or design of any projects. And some examples of recent, well, not necessarily recent, but natural resource damage settlement cases in proximity to us would be the Rocky Flats site, as well as the Shattuck site. If you're not familiar with the Shattuck site, it was a chemical manufacturing company down around Santa Fe in Florida in Denver. The lawsuit was initiated by the state in 1983, and you can see there some 25 years later. It was actually settled in 2008 with, again, Shell Oil and the U.S. Army. And the settlement resulted in 2 consent decrees, which are essentially just judgments that were agreed to by all the parties. And the first one speaks specifically to a foundation fund, which is a pot of $10 million that specifically was to be allocated to what's called the Northeast Greenway Corridor jurisdictions, which I will speak about in just a moment a little more specifically. And those funds are available immediately, and we would hope to have those toward the end of 2012. The other consent decree spoke specifically to the Recovery Fund, which is a pot of $17.4 million, and it's also intended to fund natural resource damage projects. Those funds, however, will not be available for approximately 2 to 6 years. So a little bit about the Northeast Greenway Corridor Advisory Committee. The consent decree from the trustees of the state also stipulated that as part of that consent decree that the Northeast Greenway Corridor Advisory Committee be created. Now, the Northeast Greenway Corridors essentially refers to those jurisdictions listed there: Adams County, Aurora, Brighton, Commerce City, Denver, Thornton, and the Sand Creek Regional Greenway Partnership. And the advisory committee consists of elected officials from each of those cities, as well as the Board of County Commissioners and the executive director of the Sand Creek Regional Greenway Partnership. And they comprise the advisory committee. Once that was formed, and this was several years ago, they set out to create a staff working group, which is comprised of staff members from each of those jurisdictions or agencies. And they were charged with essentially creating and doing the outreach related to these projects or this process, creating the project evaluation or criteria, some of those, not all of those. And at the end of the day, creating an overall restoration plan that would be approved by the advisory committee, which again are the elected officials from all those organizations. And once that was agreed to, it would be taken forward to the state trustees for approval for the disbursement of those funds for specific projects. And the trustees envisioned that this would be done cooperatively and collectively with these jurisdictions, knowing that there would be significant competition for these funds. And we've been very successful in doing that thus far. Back to the foundation fund. Again, this was part of the first consent decree, and it was specifically the settlement with Shell Oil Company. It was, again, in the amount of $10 million. Those eligible for these funds are those members of the Northeast Greenway Corridor Advisory Committee, those jurisdictions I just spoke about. The project evaluation, the criteria that has to be met to expend those funds, are the NRD criteria, which I talked about in the second slide, which is, again, the funds have to be spent on some sort of project that's going to restore or replenish the natural resource that was damaged, whether it be soil, surface water, groundwater. Again, it has to be specifically related to that. It also has to be consistent with the Northeast Greenway Corridor vision, which is really just the vision for this northeast quadrant of the metro area for its connected systems of parks, trails, open space, so forth. It also has to be consistent with the Rocky Mountain Arsenal National Wildlife Refuge Master Plan, which in and of itself is a restoration plan. It has to be a feasible project. And lastly, matching funds were identified as one of the evaluation criteria that would be heavily weighted when making decisions about which projects would receive funding. The timeline, we submitted those applications for the foundation fund projects in February of this year. April, I believe it's April 2nd, a resolution will be coming forward to council asking you to support specifically the foundation fund projects. Staff has met with Mayor Ford, who is the Northeast Greenway Corridor Advisory Committee member. It's again the elected official or the mayor from the cities. And this evening, we're certainly bringing it forward to the entire council and requesting, essentially updating you that there is a forthcoming resolution that will ask you to support this list of projects. And it will be attached to that resolution, and I'll go over those in a few minutes, but that'll be the action needed again on April 2nd. And then lastly, once the advisory committee, again, those elected officials agree to all those projects, the disbursement of those funds and the amounts, the intent would be in July of this year to have the advisory committee submit that or take that to the state trustees to get their blessing. And then from that point, we're hoping again by the end of the year that those funds could be distributed. You can see here, this is a list of those projects for the foundation fund that were collectively and cooperatively agreed to by those jurisdictions within the Northeast Greenway Corridor group. Again, those were the only entities eligible for these funds, and staff worked for a number of months to come up with these projects and to agree to the funding amounts and the specific projects. You can see there that Commerce City did receive the highest funding. We're at $2.6 million. Denver is the next closest at $2.5 million. You'll notice, though, that the total there is actually $10,150,000. It was anticipated by the Attorney General's office that the interest that's been collected on the account would more than cover that overage at this point. If we're not able to go over the $10 million, though, the City of Denver has agreed that they would reduce the amount of their projects. So again, Commerce City ended up with $2.6 million for our project, which is the Second Creek outfall, which I will speak specifically to now. Actually, before speaking about our specific project, this map here represents all of those projects that were on that spreadsheet that you just saw on the previous slide. And you can see, again, they're all generally in this northeast corridor or quadrant of the city. And so that represents all of those that were on that list. Our specific foundation fund project, and again, I'm speaking just about the foundation fund at this point. The project is the Second Creek Outfall. It's a project that's part of the regional drainage or master plan for drainage for the Second Creek corridor. This particular project would restore the creek channel north past the O'Brien Canal. Currently, the O'Brien Canal crosses the Second Creek corridor and actually stops its flow because the banks of the O'Brien Canal are significantly higher than the surrounding grade. Additionally, below 112th Avenue, and I'll have a map to go over all this in a moment, but below 112th Avenue, this will also create what we believe is a sizable drainage pond or wetland area. It could be as much as 15 acres of surface area of water at some times, though keep in mind that that water will fluctuate up and down depending upon storm events, their proximity and how recent they are to one another in the area. For that particular project, we've requested $2.6 million from the Natural Resource Damage Fund. The city's match would be $1.4 million from the Second Creek Drainage Impact Fee. That's a fee that we've been collecting for a number of years, specifically rated or related to drainage impacts in Second Creek. So again, if you recall, matching funds was an important criteria, a heavily weighted criteria. So the city would have a match for that. In addition to that, we believe if we are to use the NRDS funds and the Second Creek Drainage Impact Fees, we could use that as a match, and we feel confident that we could go to the Adams County Open Space Board and request additional funds to take this wetland pond and actually make it more of a recreational amenity. We would seek to put a perimeter trail around the pond, perhaps create a trailhead parking lot there, some picnicking facilities, and other recreational amenities that could be enjoyed by the residents. So essentially, we're doing a drainage infrastructure project, but also have the opportunity to make it a viable and pleasant place that folks could go and visit and actually recreate. So the map here, let's start with a little bit of orientation. Chambers is going to be to your east, and to your west would be Potomac. You'll see I-76 there to the north, the red line, and then the south purple line there is 112th Avenue. So that's the general vicinity. And you can see that squiggly line there is the O'Brien Canal. And just below 112th Avenue, you can see Second Creek there, essentially where the canal, the banks of the canal just stop the flow of Second Creek. So there would actually be a siphon put under the O'Brien Canal. It would allow flows to continue onto that property north of it and along the traditional or the existing or prior, actually the historic Second Creek Channel. And again, this is what makes it eligible for the funding from the Natural Resource Damage Settlement, is that we're restoring the flow of Second Creek, the surface water in Second Creek. We're restoring groundwater north of where it currently is now, where it was stopped because of the canal. So those are the specific items that help us specifically meet that criteria that we have to restore or replenish that damaged resource. In addition to that, to the south of the O'Brien, you see there, we're approximating, again, a 15-acre pond. Again, water levels will fluctuate, but we believe it'll create a nice riparian habitat, wetlands, and again, an opportunity to make it a recreational amenity. I will also mention that north of 112th Avenue, as part of this project, it's necessary that we acquire 15 to 20 acres of that property north. It's the Johnny Vaughn owns that particular parcel, or the Vaughn family, I should say, and we need to acquire it to continue that channel for Second Creek. In addition to that, though, that entire parcel is identified in the Parks, Trails, and Open Space Master Plan or the Prairways Action Plan as a future community park site. So we would seek to acquire the entire parcel. Again, we need it for the drainage project, but we also need it for a future park site. So again, we've been in discussions with the property owner. We believe we've reached a tentative agreement to purchase the entire property, and we anticipate that that will happen this fall. Reason being for that is we believe that we could get the Adams County Open Space Board to fund 50% of that property purchase, and there'll be a grant cycle in the fall that we would apply for. The specific funding source for that acquisition has not been identified, but prior to doing that, of course, staff would come forward with some recommendations on where those funds could come from. Okay, moving on to the recovery fund. Again, previously was the foundation fund, and the city was guaranteed money out of that fund from, again, being one of the original jurisdictions in the Northeast Greenway corridor. This particular consent decree was the settlement reached with Shell Oil and the U.S. Army. The previous one was just with Shell Oil. This also included the U.S. Army. It's $17.4 million worth of funds reached in the settlement. Eligibility, government entities, again, the City of Commerce City and all those other jurisdictions that were mentioned in the Foundation Fund projects, but other nonprofits are eligible to apply for these funds, so the competition will be greater. The project it's important to note, we're not guaranteed funds through this particular process. We will submit projects for it and request funding, and I'll go over those in just a few moments, but again, there's no guarantee here as there was with the foundation funds. The evaluation of those projects will be exactly the same as it was for the foundation fund. It needs to meet the NRDS requirement as well as those other 3 or 4 listed there on the slide. The time frame for that is, the submittals are due April 11th of this year, so we're working on those applications. And again, as with the foundation fund, the hope is that in July, the advisory committee, the Northeast Greenway Advisory Committee, could take that forward to the state trustees for approval. We've identified 3 projects that we'll be submitting applications for that we believe best fit the criteria, all of those criteria that have to be met. The first one there is the Mall Reservoir at 90, and again, I'll have a map for this as well, at 96th Avenue and Peoria Street. The cost of that project is approximately $4.5 million. That would essentially be a duplicate of the project that would be happening on Second Creek, the foundation fund, except it would be on First Creek. Again, it's also part of the First Creek drainage master plan. It would also create a large reservoir, actually larger than the one that would be on Second Creek, and it would help begin to start restoring flows of First Creek to the South Platte River, as it's been blocked by it's blocked by railroads, it's blocked by highways, it's blocked by the O'Brien Canal as well. So it would, again, essentially duplicate the foundation fund project. The second one there is just overall restoration in the Second Creek corridor. The city has had a significant amount of acreage dedicated to it through the subdivision process as open space, and we would request $1 million to just go in and do basic restoration along the corridor, and that would include removing invasive weeds or noxious weeds, enhancing the stands of natural native grasses there, doing some bank stabilization, all those things that are related to restoring that creek corridor. Again, we have to go back to restoring the resource that was damaged. And then lastly, we would try to come to a cooperative agreement with the current owner of the Second Creek racetrack site, whereby we could go in and restore that site, entirely clean it up, restore it to its historical condition. And we're hoping we could potentially do that prior to when the owner of the property is able to do it. So we believe that it's a viable project, and it would certainly meet the criteria. And we've ranked those in order of our priority, not only based on what we think essentially gets us the biggest bang for the buck, but also what we believe would receive the most likelihood of getting funding. It's important to note again, matching funds are heavily weighted criteria when they make decisions. So 30% of the total project cost would need to be matched in order to move forward with these projects. So that would be 30% of any one individual project, or collectively $1.85 million. And again, those funds have not been specifically identified, but as we get closer to these funds being released, staff would come back to council with a variety of options for funding those matches. This is a map showing those 3 projects I just went over. We'll start with the Second Creek restoration there, and Tracy will point. It's essentially the Second Creek corridor, about from 96th Avenue all the way to that reservoir site, or 112th Avenue. Then there's the Mall Reservoir at it's roughly 96th and Peoria Street, and that's along First Creek. And then lastly, there's the Second Creek racetrack site, which is at 88th and Buckley, or between 88th and 96th along Buckley. So the Northeast Greenway Corridor and the Natural Resource Damage Settlement has a lot of history to it, and there's a lot of information related to it. So if you want to do some late night reading, this is a website that you can go to that has a good history on it, could answer a lot of those questions if we're unable to answer them this evening. So with that, we're certainly entertain any questions that you may have about the presentation.
Great. Thank you. Sure. Mr. Douglas?
I think it's from previous, but I do have a question. Thank you, Mike. On the Second Creek racetrack restoration on 88th and Buckley, I see how it starts down near the Arsenal and goes all the way up to, Highway 76?
The racetrack restoration is the property there that Tracy is,
But
got the
orange-
cursor on.
The orange part, though, that's,
Yeah, that's the
that whole
second-
area is going to be, that comes into play, correct?
Yeah, that would be the Second Creek corridor, the floodplain of Second Creek, which would be a separate project from the Second Creek racetrack site restoration. It was just named the Second Creek
Okay.
racetrack, sorry.
Just by looking at this, the demographics, and then, I hate to bring this into play, but we have the oil and gas situation going on. If we go through and restore all this, and somehow things get damaged, would there be a recourse for them to mitigate?
I'm currently not aware of any surface right or surface use agreements between the city, the now owner of the Second Creek corridor, or any mineral and gas interests. That doesn't mean that there aren't any. Generally, when those activities are done, there's some sort of agreement that is reached between the two parties about how that will occur, where they will set up, where they will operate, so on and so forth. We could certainly request, and I would imagine that they would be amenable to restorative efforts of anything that they damage or disturb while in there.
Okay, not saying that something will occur. And then in the northern area, up towards 76 there, I happened to follow a demolition truck a couple years ago from the Gates Rubber Company. They were demolishing that area and breaking things up. And they came up and dumped that right where the area where you guys are trying to acquire that property there. They kind of dug the area out, dumped the contaminated products there and covered them up. So is there going to be any soil testing when you acquire land, or do you guys do any soil testing to see if there's any past issues with the soil?
The site you're referring to is actually just west of the parcel that we would acquire. Tracy, if you can, there you go. That portion that's not highlighted in orange, we would be acquiring all floodplain, which would be represented in orange. That's the Fiore and Sons property. They own that property, and I believe they put inert fill there from their demolition operations or from their operations. That property is currently in the county, and I'm assuming that they've just buried inert fill there. So we wouldn't be looking to acquire it or build anything on it. So the city we wouldn't do any testing there unless we did acquire it, but it's not our intent to do so.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Moreno.
Mike, thanks for the presentation. I do have quite a few questions, but first I just want to say I really appreciate being brought up to speed on all this. A couple of months ago, an article came out in the Your Hub, and without any of, obviously, the attachments that come to the funding. And I got very excited and started to ask about different projects that we could do. And Mr. Bullock, who has much more background in this, was sure to correct me about that certain projects would only qualify. So a couple of questions. With both the foundation and the recovery fund money, is that all one-time money?
Yes.
Okay. And do you know how the state trustee board is composed? Who sits on that?
It is, it's the Attorney General, John Suthers. It's the Executive Director of the CDPHE, which currently is Chris Urbina.
Okay.
And then lastly, the Executive Director of the Colorado Department of Natural Resources, which is Mike King.
Great. And you spoke about the eventual improvements that are going to be made to the Second Creek floodplain. Do we anticipate that having any effect on agricultural water supply in that area? There are still some agricultural lands that abut Second Creek. Would that have an effect on those operations?
We haven't looked at it specifically, but I feel confident in that none of the properties that are farmed adjacent to Second Creek would actually draw water from Second Creek to do that. I think most of the stuff planted there is dry land crops, and as best I know. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. And looking at, if you could pull up the map with the Second Creek area, do we have eventual plans for example, like an underpass at Chambers for that trail?
That is in the Second Creek Master Plan. And currently in design right now, we have the purple or the pink lines you see there are where currently we've stopped construction of the Second Creek Trail. The purple would show its eventual traverse northwest up to the reservoir and where it would meet up with the O'Brien Canal. The master plan shows a subgrade crossing there. We're designing the subgrade crossing there. As always, it'll come down to whether funding's available. To do it at that time, we may have to have an interim at-grade crossing until at such time we can afford it, or until drainage improvements are actually done, which would put in a bigger culvert.
Gotcha. Could you explain in a little bit more detail the Mall Reservoir project?
Yes. Trace, if you go to that. So essentially, the Mall Reservoir project would be, again, almost identical to the Second Creek outfall one. It's a retention-detention pond, again, to collect water and slow, actually detention, slow its flow to the South Platte River. Currently, First Creek and Second Creek, neither one of them actually in their historic or natural state can flow all the way to the South Platte River as they historically did. Again, because the O'Brien Canal intersects both of them and the grades of the canal are much higher than the surrounding floodplain. Highway 2 cuts across both of them. So those flows can't ultimately make it to the South Platte River. So the master plan for both of those corridors is over time and through a bunch of projects collectively to restore the flows all the way to the South Platte River. The Mall Reservoir would be a detention pond along First Creek. It would take flows off of the arsenal, hold it, release it slowly toward the South Platte River. Once those connections are made, there is a need now, though, for just storage until such time it can be released.
So are we anticipating that it would merely serve that purpose, or would it eventually double as a recreational opportunity?
We would certainly try to do something similar to what we're planning to do on the Second Creek outfall, which would be probably to do some restorative efforts around it. Right now, that particular property, in fact, was dedicated to the city as part of the settlement as well. Shell Oil previously owned that property. It's been dedicated to us. It's fallow farmland, and it's probably not in real good shape. There's a lot of weeds on it. So we'd have to do some restorative efforts, but again, we would probably want to put a perimeter trail around it, some picnicking facilities, so on and so forth, make it a passive recreational use as well.
Great, thank you. And regarding the recovery funds, we currently don't have a match identified in city dollars, right, for that, but those funds don't become available for a couple of years anyway, so we have some time?
Yes and no. The plan is that those funds would not be available for 2 to 6 years. There has been a desire by other members on the Northeast Greenway corridor to essentially meet with the trustees and request the release of those funds sooner, much sooner, like at the same time that the foundation funds are released. And internal staff discussions with the leadership team, they were made aware of that. So while we would prefer that it happened a couple of years from now so that we had more time to vet and plan for these projects, but also identify matching funds, it was determined that if we needed to find them sooner, we could do that, and we would come back with those options.
Okay. And regarding the foundation dollars, the matching grant comes from the Second Creek impact fees, 1.4 million, is that correct?
Correct.
Do you know how much is currently in the impact fee fund for Second Creek?
I believe it's 1.4 million. I don't know for certain, but I'm going to guess.
Big spenders, okay. Thank you. And then, let's see, the Vaughn property, we had some discussion about that at the retreat, about some talk about perhaps park impact fees being used to acquire that property. Do we have a fixed figure on how much that property would cost yet?
We do, but because I don't have a have a signed contract at this point. I would rather not reveal the purchase price, but park impact fee has been identified as one of the potential funding sources for that. Again, keeping in mind that we're fairly confident the Adams County Open Space Board would fund at least 50% of that purchase, which would reduce the expenditure out of the park fund. And it's important to note that while it's not ideal to spend the park fee on, again, more land that we're going to develop in the future, as part of the master plan, it's a large regional park, or will be at some point in the future. And when the opportunity presents itself to acquire it, you certainly need to do that at that time. And we would be purchasing at today's price as opposed to the price of land 20 years from now. But again, the finance director would come back with a variety of options for how we would fund that purchase.
I do agree with that approach. Just looking at the map, I mean, Second Creek would just be a huge regional recreational opportunity for residents in the Northern Range, and for all residents for that matter, to access. So I think that's the right tack to take.
Certainly, yeah. It's a regional trail corridor along Second Creek. It intersects with the O'Brien Canal, which connects to the South Platte River in the south, and then also to Bar Lake State Park to the north. So it creates a nice connection of open spaces, which really is, again, the idea of the Northeast Greenway Corridor, is all these connected trail corridors, open spaces, so on and so forth.
Thank you.
Mr. Bullock.
Mr. Marino asked all the right questions at the right time, and he got the right answers. And being on the Sand Creek Regional Greenway on the Foundation Fund, I knew about this, but I wasn't at liberty to discuss it because of the fact that there were a lot of different cities vying for the same money. And the Recovery Fund, even though it was supposed to be doled out down the road, it seems like there seems to be a lot of cities that want their inheritance now instead of later. And it's really put not only us but other cities on the spot because of the fact that they are trying to hurry to put forth a project that they weren't thinking about because they thought they had 2 or 3 years in order to survey their different projects. But we're in a great position to have a gigantic regional recreation area up north. And when you look at the map and you include the Vaughn property and Second Creek property as it goes back to Chambers, you will see that this is going to be spectacular for the residents up north, where when they start walking, we may not see them for a couple of days. So if everything goes as it should, and if everything falls in the right places, we will be in a great position, Commerce City.
Okay. Thank you for the update. We'll look forward to seeing more in April.
Okay. Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is Administrative Council business. Any council members have any administrative business they'd like to bring forward at this time? Mrs. Carson.
First of all, can we get an update about the traffic study at Bell Creek?
Yes, we, in fact, had a meeting previous to this meeting with the 3 primary residents that were appeared at the council meeting a couple weeks ago, and discussed the results of the speed study, also some results from police reports of incidents in the area and pedestrian traffic and tickets and that sort of thing. Also talked about some of the enforcement efforts that the police department has been taking the last few days. And then we also looked at some options, alternatives, because this is a different situation with a collector street that serves a lot of traffic through Bell Creek, but it also is a residential street with residents on one side and a school on the other with a park, that we need to look a little harder at some of those alternatives. And we had a really good discussion on that, and we'll be bringing forward those ideas and a plan for action in the near future. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you. And the next item is, I would like for council to give permission for staff to engage in conversation or thought process, whatever it is. On 120th is the dividing line of the City of Brighton and City of Commerce City. And Prairie View High School sits there, Prairie View Middle sits there. I think it would be a great place for the three of us, City of Commerce City, Brighton, and School District 27J, to go into and look into going into a partnership of building a pool, which would be used by both cities and by the school district. The cost would be shared by all three, probably. I know our students definitely could use a pool. I know our citizens would love to have a pool. I think it's a perfect opportunity that we should look into. When I attend NLC and CML, they talk about these partnerships, that if you're going to do things in your cities, you need to start working with each other in order for citizens to get everything that citizens would like to have in their community. I would just like to open conversations to see what the possibilities of this would be. I've put a few feelers out. I think that everybody would be very willing to look into this to see what the possibilities are. So with council's permission, I would like for staff to move forward with that.
I don't think that's a bad idea, Councilwoman, to at least have the staff explore the opportunity of a partnership. And you know, we will be hosting the next joint meeting between 27J, the City Council of Brighton, as well as District 14. And that's coming up, I believe, next month in April.
I think it's May.
No, I think it's April.
5th month?
I think it's April. But our staff knows when it is. They're going to be setting that up. But in the meantime, I don't have a problem giving some direction to staff to go ahead and start those conversations so that at that meeting we have an idea of what's going on. What are the desires of council? Mr. Douglas?
I can make a motion to have the staff look into that.
Okay. Mr. Bullock?
I'll second that.
A motion and a second to have staff work with the other two jurisdictions to come up with at least some ideas for the council to consider as a partnership on a pool with 27J and Brighton. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Gives you some direction. Mr. Bullock, do you have something further?
No, I was...
Okay. Is there any other administrative council business? Mr. Moreno? Oh, no, I'm sorry. Mr. Douglas was first. Mr. Douglas?
Oh, thank you. Hey, I was going to see how the other council members feel about maybe moving. I know there was some talk about just a meeting or a presentation for State of Our City. Is that correct? That received less?
We're going to have, you guys received an email about the state of the city?
Yes.
And I wasn't able to comment on that Friday. I was going to ask if we look at moving that until the early fall instead of right now, being our city the way it's situated right now.
You know, that's a lot of the discussion that I had with Michelle was about timing and the fact that we have several new council members and to make sure everybody's acclimated. There are things that have happened prior with the previous council that also need to be recognized. So really what the email that you all received was for that type of input to determine when we should have the state of the city, at what point in time throughout the year should we have the state of the city, on what day. I would prefer it to be an evening rather than a morning so that more of our residents could attend. But really, the feedback that Michelle needs is from you guys directly back to her so that she can start putting things together. So I would recommend to you to respond by email to Michelle Halstead.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Moreno.
Just one brief item. Wanted to remind council about the Habitat for Humanity Build Day this Saturday, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. I have your release forms, so you can't sue anyone if you get hurt, with me tonight, so I will be passing those out for those that are able to attend. We do have spots open, so if anyone in the community or any staff member would like to volunteer as well, please just contact me.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any other council administrative business? Seeing none, we'll go into reports. Acting interim city manager?
No report, Mayor. Thank you.
How about city attorney?
I have nothing else this evening.
Great, thank you. For my report, myself and Councilman Bullock met with David Cole, introduced us to a local company that has an interest in bidding on the demo of the dog track at and if which time that takes place. I also attended Rotary, and last Thursday I had the opportunity to deliver Meals on Wheels. As it's the month of March is for the Meals on Wheels campaign, and I delivered meals to about 20 residents in Commerce City. Ran 2 different routes, and they have their program. It's called the Mayors for Meals campaign, and really enlightening when you get to go out and engage with residents that otherwise don't get to see anybody else at all other than the Meals on Wheels delivery person. And interesting to visit with these folks and actually see a component of our community that most people don't see. So I really thoroughly enjoyed the opportunity on Thursday to go out and engage with those residents. Is there any additional report information the council would like to add? Seeing none, there be no further business to come before the City Council of Commerce City this evening. We're adjourned.
Mayor Ford, I need your signature.